Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. This is Frank Gaffney, your host and guide for what I think of as an intelligence briefing on the war for the free world. It is a high pleasure and great privilege to welcome for the first time to our microphones a woman who has distinguished herself in uniform of the United States Air Force specifically, and now in the halls of the United States Congress. She is Representative Martha McSally. She represents today the people of the 2nd Congressional District of Arizona. She is also a retired colonel in the United States Air Force who has distinguished herself, as I say, in a number of ways, notably flying the first combat mission for a female and also commanding, for the first time as a female, the squadron of the Air Force involved in combat operations, an A-10 instructor pilot, among other things. Congresswoman, it is great to have you with us. Thank you for all of that service to our country and that you're providing at the moment. Welcome aboard.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Frank.
Let me just talk about a couple of things that are high policy that I know you're also following closely and are I think, concerned about, as am I. Maybe we could start with Iran. What's your take on what's happening in the negotiations with Iran and the advisability of the deal that seems to be emerging?
Well, we're past the deadline, as you know, so the self-imposed deadline of June 30th has already been blown through. It seems to me that we're still pretty far away from any agreement that would be considered to be a good deal by those of us who care about this largest state sponsor of terror getting a nuclear capability, being legitimized by the leader of the free world, and be able to continue to be an existential threat to our strong ally Israel. So, you know, we've passed the legislation in the House and the Senate with the veto-proof vote that allows us to give an up or down vote to the final deal with some other restrictions involved. And if they go past July 9th for their final agreement, then we will actually have 30 additional days to review and put the brakes on any bad deal. And I'm of the view that no deal is better than a bad deal. And it seems like from what we've seen out of the framework and the reports of the negotiations that there's still several very concerning elements to the concessions that the administration has made with their myopic approach that they've just got to get any deal. So, you know, I've had 6 combat deployments and, you know, a couple master's degrees involved with national security. So I've been studying this issue in this region my whole 26 years in the military. And so I've been a strong, loud voice, making sure that we have the strength to vote down a bad deal. I led a letter that we wrote from the Arizona delegation, bipartisan. 8 of 9 of us signed it to the Speaker and Pelosi to make sure that they understood where we are at related to what constitutes a good deal and a bad deal. And we can walk through some of those issues if you'd like to. But I'm deeply concerned that the president is wanting to do whatever it takes to get a deal. At the same time, by the way, not looking strategically at the larger issues in the Middle East and Iran's role of the blood that they have on their hands of American soldiers and others through their proxy wars, through Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Quds Force, and all that they continue to do as a state sponsor of terror, somehow being dismissed as they are working to have some sort of legacy item in Obama's failed foreign policy.
Your colleague, Congressman Trent Franks, also from Arizona, has made the point that the Iranians have apparently adopted a doctrine which calls for the use of electromagnetic pulse against our electric grid, and that would, as you know, constitute an existential threat to the United States as well as to Israel. Is that of concern to you as well?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, none of this obviously is discussed in the deal as well. So yeah, absolutely. This is a potentiality that is, some people think low probability, but certainly high risk. And if that's a part of their doctrine, that actually could be a devastating blow to us as a nation as well.
Let me switch gears, and we could spend days talking about this, and I hope we will in the future have a further conversation with you about the Iran piece, but your approach seems just right to me. How about this effort to degrade and defeat, as the president calls it, the Islamic State? 2 of our colleagues in the Wall Street Journal today, Hillel Fredkin and Scooter Libby, talk about this as a phony war. You've been in real wars. I wonder, especially as an accomplished Air Force pilot, what you make of the kinds of strikes we've been conducting to date against the Islamic State. Does it really amount to basically phony war?
Oh, absolutely. I have been very critical of the administration and their failed strategy and how they're using air power in a gradualistic and pinprick sort of way since they started strikes a year ago. And again, the false choices that they tend to create, which is it's either air power, which appears to be not working, or it's, send a 250,000 Americans on the ground, which we don't want to do. So we have this sort of false choice of boots on the ground versus air power. And because of the failed way that they're using air power, it's making people think like, well, I guess air power doesn't work. But the reality is that from the very beginning, we had the opportunity to defeat and destroy their command and control, their logistics capabilities, their some of the ways that they're getting resources while they're out in the open, some of their military capabilities. And even now, we are using a gradualistic approach that reminds me of Rolling Thunder in Vietnam that just doesn't work. And we are doing minimal strikes. We have legitimate targets that we are not hitting because of concern for maybe, one civilian casualty might happen. And look, we don't want civilian casualties. I get that could turn an entire, village against us. But, the laws of armed conflict are very clear. I've been involved in the targeting process from, being a wingman in the A-10, a squadron commander, and then all the way up to at the combatant command level, running our targeting cell for Africa Command. I understand this process. We want to minimize civilian casualties. Of course, we don't target civilians. We do everything we can, whether it's vary our run-in headings or delay fuses and all sorts of things in order to minimize civilian casualties. But the thought that we would come off a legitimate target and not hit it, and therefore embolden ISIS to murder hundreds and thousands more civilians because we want to make sure we, don't have one, civilian casualty while we're hitting a legitimate target is just ridiculous. And so I've been very critical. Really cornered the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense last week in an Armed Services Committee hearing about this. So, I've written about it and been speaking about it on national television. We have vital national interests at stake here, and we are hoping that somehow the Iran-backed Shia government in Iraq is going to be inclusive of Sunnis and get them to fight, or have Shias fighting in Sunni territories and hoping it all works out. Hope is not a strategy. And we're acting like we're an Air Force supporting their ground force as opposed to, fighting for America's vital national interest to destroy and defeat them and create the space for, a political solution. But now it looks like ISIS is taking on America and winning, which adds to their recruiting and the foreign fighter flow and all the things that show that they have the momentum and not us.
Congresswoman, let me just ask you very quickly, and we only have about a minute left, but it is important. Your experience in the military has been extraordinary, and yet I find myself in disagreement about one point in what you're doing in Congress, and that is on, as I understand it, championing this idea that women should serve not only in combat roles like you have, but also in ground combat positions. Would you just explain why you think that's a good idea, and whether, if it does involve reducing the standards for our military personnel, men specifically, that might actually prove counterproductive to good combat operations capability?
Yeah, it has never been against the law for women to be in ground combat, first of all. It was only against the law for women to be in the air and in the sea combat. So this has always been a policy, and the policy has changed. But look, this is about the best fighting force, and my advocacy is we got to pick the best man for the job, even if it's a woman, no matter what the job is. Let's set the standards, which includes physical plus aptitude plus leadership plus all sorts of other things we need in our fighting force, and let's pick the best person. The fact that we would say women can't do this and all men can means, by virtue of that, Serena Williams is not capable, but Justin Bieber is. That's ridiculous. This is about America. We are individuals. We are meritocratic. We have in the past lowered standards of criminal records and high school graduation and aptitude tests in order to fill the Army in 2005, 2006, 2007 timeframe. So, we've lowered standards in the past, but we don't need to lower standards. We need to keep standards that are based on the warfighting jobs, and then we need to let people compete and pick the best people for the job. That's my perspective. This is about the best fighting force.
This is a subject I hope for a longer conversation again soon. Thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. Congressman McSally of Arizona, it's great to talk with you, and as I say, I hope you'll continue serving your country as you are and have done now for so long, for so well. Keep it up. Talk to us soon. Mauricio Claver Caron joins us. A bad deal in Iran, bad deal in Cuba. Straight ahead.